Welcome everybody into another edition of Warm Weather Fans, the Sunbelt podcast. My name is Brian Stone, joined once again this week by Zeke Palermo, who was on the previous two episodes that we did last week, where we talked about Southern Miss and Georgia State. But this week we're once again joined by our third co-host, Matt Miguez, who's in the process of moving. So honestly, Matt, thanks for taking the time to sit down with us. And then once again, another guest that we have had on before, Aikman Chambers, App State fan, historian, aficionado, whatever title he prefers, here to talk about this year's Mountaineers team, what went wrong with last year's team, what got Shawn Clark eventually out of there. We talked a little bit about that when he was fired, but yeah, we're all here, full crew today. Start with Zeke. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, I don't mean to butt in, but for our listeners that don't know, Aikman Chambers is secretly Yosef. He's got the look. He's got the thick black beard. You just need the pipe and the top hat, and you're rocking and rolling.
I'll only break that out during football season. That's put up in the closet right now.
It's a little bit almost like Mormon Quaker attire, just like a smidge, a hair in that direction. I know y'all probably hate that, but it is kind of what it looks like. You belong in upstate Pennsylvania, to be quite honest. But Aikman, thanks for joining us. How's it going with you, man?
Man, it's going great. Thank you guys so much for having me back on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. Been going full steam ahead. Hard to believe that here we are, this last stretch of summer before we really get into things. College football season going to be here before we know it. I'm excited. I'm pumped. It's a new era for App State football, something we don't say very often. We talked about this when we did the pod together months ago when Clark got fired at who may be the next head coach. And if I remember correctly, we had saw the rumors of Dow Loggins. So I can't wait to get into all this, because the one thing I will say off the top, the way that the fan base took the announcement versus where they sit now here in July after seeing the portal and other things, the tone has shifted around Boone quite a bit. And I know we're going to dive into a lot of that.
I mean, you kind of have to, right? Like, even if you don't love the hire, you're at a point where it's like, it's almost like a roller coaster is about to take off, and you're like, yeah, I'm strapped in. Like, what am I going to do now? Like, I'm gonna start crying about it now. Like, no, it is what it is. Matt, you didn't join us last week. How's it going with you, man?
Man, everything's good. Life has changed quite a bit over the last couple of weeks. Currently, or I was going to say currently unemployed, but as my stepmom told me to tell people, I'm temporarily retired. Moved about 25 minutes outside of New Orleans. Currently living with my wife's family. That old, in between jobs, let's save some money kind of situation. So really excited about that. Looking forward to talking some Cajuns in a couple weeks, and really excited to get into this App State team tonight, because I've got a lot of thoughts on, kind of what the mindset is in Boone, and what can we kind of expect on the field from this team.
Sure. And then throwing it around the horn last to Zeke. How are you, man?
Yeah, I'm good. We touched on this, Matt. This is our third season. I'm in my third location as we record. Brian and his setup is the only constant in this podcast. It's the same.
Death, taxes, my basement.
His basement with that weird sheet of paper to his left shoulder.
It's not paper. I don't know what the hell it is, to be quite honest with you. When I moved in, I thought the router was back here because AT&T insisted that I had hookups. Turns out I didn't. I don't know what this is. So, sorry.
You need to get some memorabilia and hang it behind you. You're looking really bland.
I mean, I work in this setup, and I usually have a blurred background on Zoom, so nobody cares except on this podcast. To be
I guess
quite
that's
honest
fair.
with you.
I guess
All
that's
right.
fair.
We are gathered here today to talk about the 2025 App State Mountaineers and the marriage to new head coach Dowell Loggins. So Loggins obviously comes over from South Carolina, where he was the offensive coordinator, saw a good bit of success. They have a really dynamic quarterback there. And Lenora Sellers was tearing things up last year. So logistically, it makes sense that they would consider that a big getting Loggins to come over from what seems to be kind of an up and coming SEC team. Now, some of the pieces that they have on this year's team are unfamiliar, and so that leads itself not only with the new head coach, but with these new players to a lot of kind of uncertainty with the outlook of this team. Now, previous quarterback Joey Aguilar, UCLA legend Joey Aguilar, having never thrown a pass for the Bruins, is gone. He's now 2 schools removed from App State. So, best of luck to him. Aikman, take us through kind of what is the. I think a better way to frame it is, what was the kind of the overall general consensus when Loggins was hired, and what is kind of the consensus today? Where do we kind of sit with the hire and how the kind of team is set up to go in 2025?
Well, it was around Christmas when Dowell Loggins was hired as the new App State head coach. And for someone like me, to throw what I thought at first, I'm going to be honest, I was a little bit underwhelmed because we had done the podcast and we were talking about, like, Neil Brown was a guy we thought was going to be a coveted candidate for this job. And then as things started to shake out, it looked more and more unlikely that he was going to be the guy. And then Dowell Loggins' name started to emerge kind of late in the process. And a lot of people didn't know what to think. They thought, well, this is a guy, he's had all the NFL experience. Then he goes to college. He's doing very dynamic things with Spencer Rattler and Lenora Sellers at South Carolina. So when he gets the job, a lot of people don't know. They're kind of like, this is a little bit underwhelming. We were expecting, I think most people had put their eggs in that Neil Brown basket. They had kind of convinced themselves that was going to be the way that this thing went. And when it didn't do that, I think a lot of people were left kind of like bummed out, simply because they had kind of just already been dreaming about Neil Brown standing from one Mountaineer sideline to another, coming from Morgantown to Boone. But as we go through the winter and into the spring, and you start seeing the moves that Dow has made in the transfer portal, some of the moves, I think, as in players going out, were necessary. I think we lost some players that it's better off that they went ahead and left, especially after the underwhelming play that was left by some of the starters from a season ago, because I think new blood was needed. And I think you're going to see that this fall. But I think he started putting his staff together. There's some guys here who have a lot of NFL ties. He has the NFL experience, I think, and that's one of the things he has constantly talked about. I've listened to a few different interviews that he has done, and one even locally here close to where I live. He was on a radio show with a friend of mine, and he even said, he pointed out, NFL this, I was NFL this. I think that is going to be his calling card to a lot of guys, is trying to get them to say, hey, if you come here, you play well for us, I've got enough connections, I can at least get you headed in that NFL direction. So I think from that perspective, it started to, people's viewpoints on it started to change, look up a little bit. And let's face it, with how last year went, at the way the season ended especially, you kind of had no choice but to turn your viewpoint to being somewhat optimistic once a new coach was announced.
I mean, I think that's fair, but I mean, also, like I said, you're kind of out of options at this far, this far into the off season / preseason. At this point, you don't really have a choice but to be optimistic. I mean, other than that, you're sitting around going, all right, well, we're not going to be very good this year. So, like, those are your two options. So, Matt, you said you had a lot of takes / opinions on App State. Do you have any kind of broader ones that you'd like to get off right at the top, or do you want to kind of save those as we get more specific?
I do want to say one thing to what Aikman had to say about Dowell Loggins and how the hire felt a little underwhelming because he didn't have any head coaching experience, spent a lot of time in the NFL, offensive coordinator, things of that nature. Look, I'm not going to put Dowell Loggins on this pedestal just yet, but I do remember a couple of years ago, another Sunbelt school hiring a guy with no head coaching experience, spent a lot of time at an offensive coordinator, had a really good resume. The hire felt a little underwhelming off the top, and it turned out to work pretty well. And his name was Billy Napier.
10 minutes and 54 seconds. That's all it took.
That's all it took.
Got him.
Look, again, I'm not going to sit here and say Dowell Loggins is the next Billy Napier and is going to land a cush P4 job at Florida. But I think, if I can talk to the App State fan base for a little bit, yeah, I mean, the hire might feel a little underwhelming, but give the guy a real opportunity to show you what he can do, because it may turn out to be one of the best things that's ever happened to your university.
I definitely believe that, and trust me, with the way that he and his staff have already hit the recruiting trail for 26, and App State already having one of the top group of 5 recruiting classes for the class of 26, I can promise you, especially over the last, give it 2 weeks, the mood has changed tremendously. Like, it has become over the moon with some people with the way that he has seen them hit the recruiting trail and everything else. And I think this was a possibility that it could happen, obviously, but with his ties and his connections in this day and age, look, just because you get a good high school recruit for a group of 5 school, it doesn't mean anything. 1 year, if they come in as a freshman, they're going to be gone for a sophomore year. And that's just the name of the game now. But if you get them here for 1 year and you can ball out for 1 year, that's basically life now. You literally, in the Sun Belt as a group of 5 school, you have to take it year by year individually.
Before we move on there, Aikman, there was something you said also in your kind of introductory statement to the team, was that there are a few guys on this roster that were on the roster last year that are almost addition by subtraction. And as you look at statistical leaders from this past year, leading rusher is gone, quarterback gone, top 3 receivers all gone. You're missing, some of your top sack getters, some of your top tacklers. So from an outside perspective, it's easy to look at this roster and say, and we're going to go position by position, but from a high level view, it's very easy to say, what of those guys were addition by subtraction? Because you're losing a 722-yard rusher. You're losing 2 700-plus yard receivers. What are some of those guys that you think the team is better off, might be better off without this year?
Well, I'll go ahead and start out and tell you this. I mean, Caden Robinson's not one of those guys. That's one of those guys, man, losing Caden Robinson. And honestly, I'm going to go out on a limb and say another guy that I thought was a loss that's going to hurt is also Grant Tucker. Those 2 guys in the receiver room, I think, would have been killer had they found a way to be able to come back like they did. I know Caden Robinson had the health thing at the end of the year. Then the way they was, could he play at UCLA? Would they give him the ability to, and whatnot? So I understand how that planned out. There's a couple other guys, more so on the defensive side of the football, with some people that I had talked to that were in close connection with things going on that I don't want to name them by name simply just out of respect, but a couple of bigger names that are gone are addition by subtraction because locker room, off the field, things of that nature, the attitudes were not necessarily where they should be. I'm trying to think of the best way to say it without naming anybody out, just out of respect because they're gone now. And so I wish them nothing but the best. But from people that I had spoken with, that had gave me some information that they just kind of, the locker room, it wasn't exactly the most, everybody in one accord, which you can kind of expect when you're not used to losing and you have a losing season like that, and you pretty much know your coach is going to be gone at the end of the year and you're just trying to get through the season. It's one of those things that I think just a combination of things caused it to boil over.
Okay, so let's start at the top at one of the most, or I guess the most important position on the offensive side of the ball. You got the quarterback spot, which I made the reference to. Aguilar is now, again, 2 stops now removed from App State, never having taken a snap in LA, is now in Tennessee. They now have what Phil Steele projects, and Aikman, this might be incorrect, so feel free to correct us if any of this information's wrong. But Phil Steele, as of today, has AJ Swan penciled in as the presumed starter. Matt, it says that his most recent stop was at LSU last year, where he participated in 2 games. Did you see anything out of AJ Swan last year?
I mean, a lot of what he did was garbage time. He was really he was listed on the depth chart as second string, but I really think he was more of the third string guy. Now look, he did some impressive things in 2023 when he was at Vanderbilt. This is a guy that is going to stand in the pocket. He's going to make good decisions with the football. He's not going to get too cute with it, right? He's going to make good decisions. It's not going to be flashy. It's not going to be exciting, but he's going to get the job done. And I think if you put good running backs and good receivers around him, especially an offensive line to protect him, I know we're going to get into that here in a little bit. App State's offensive line only has 22 career starts among them. So, that's going to be a big question mark, obviously. But if they can figure that out pretty quickly and have him protected, I think he's a solid option at quarterback.
Aikman, I have a question for you. With Loggins being a primarily offensive guy, is there a philosophy or scheme change that App State fans are anticipating from what Clark had been running out in years past to now? Because I don't know Swan's game. Matt, I don't know if he was like a scrambler in the vein of Lenora Sellers. No. Okay. So
pocket passer.
It felt like I watched a decent bit of South Carolina last year. It felt like their offense was almost akin to, like, in the pros, like the Baltimore Ravens. Like, it's like they have a very specific guy with a skill set that does X, Y, and Z. And what happens when you take a new team that doesn't have somebody with that kind of similar skill set? What does the offense look like? So, Aikman, is there anything you guys have been able to glean so far as to what the offense is supposed to look like as opposed to what it looked like under Shawn Clark?
Well, even ever since App State really even made the jump to the FBS level, they've really been a run-first team because we've had a consistent stable of running backs to be able to be that run-first team to open up the pass. It's one of those things. I've heard that there's going to be a lot of similarities between the South Carolina offense and what App State's going to bring to the table. Now, I think that looks different. Personally, I think you look more like South Carolina with J.J. Cole over A.J. Swan. Just my opinion, if you're going to base it purely off of the South Carolina style of things. J.J. Cole really intrigues me, the Iowa State quarterback transfer, because he's got that 6'6", 6'7" frame, got some mobility there, maybe even a little bit more mobility than A.J. Swan. And to see a guy of that stature running around, doing some quarterback reads and stuff like that. But from what I have seen, neither guy looked to be in complete control in the spring game back in April. Both had really good moments when they took the majority of the reps in the spring game, but I would not say that either one had this ginormous lead over the other. But as of about a week and a half ago, I was told A.J. Swan probably has the advantage sitting here as we get ready for fall camp to open up at the end of the month. That doesn't mean anything. It can still change. But as of right now, if I would lean to the way that Phil Steele is going, because that's what I'd been told, is that A.J. Swan more than likely will be that week 1 starter when they play Charlotte at Bank of America Stadium on August 29th or 30th, whatever date it is.
Okay. So Zeke, we don't know what the quarterback spot at this point is going to look like, what kind of offense they're going to run. However, there is a familiar name in the running back room, and that's Kanye Roberts. And as of today, Phil Steele, as of this reading, has a transfer from Arkansas slated to start over Roberts. Do you think that's a mistake? Because I thought he was pretty good last year. Now, maybe he ends up being more of a change of pace type guy, but he's got some decent size to him. So I don't really understand, unless you're just looking at pedigree, like, hey, this guy played at an SEC school. I don't really understand what the knock would be.
I mean, that's, I guess, a question for Aikman, because I remember really liking what we saw at Kanye Roberts. He was obviously second fiddle to in a very good running back room, but sat behind Amani Marshall last year. I was shocked to see that name again. Who's to say what's the truth? I guess I'll deflect over to Aikman. Who's getting the carries out of this backfield?
It is hard for me to sit here and think that Kanye Roberts would not be the guy, but Rashad Dubinion, the guy you're talking about from Arkansas, I believe, that Dow Loggins, one of his few SEC transfers and one of two highly regarded Arkansas transfers that he was able to bring in. He's going to make a strong push for that starting running back position. This is a guy that runs hard. I think at the Sun Belt level, his speed's going to look even better, like it naturally would for a lot of guys that are dropping down, I think, from the SEC to the Sun Belt. You know, there were times last year, Kanye, he had some injury issues a little bit. Yeah, I know that Shawn Clark wasn't always happy. He felt like he put the ball on the turf a little bit too much at times, and that was kind of a back and forth, I think, at times between those two. But it's a fresh start for Kanye with a new coaching staff, a new quarterback. I still think Kanye Roberts is going to be a weapon in this offense this fall, but I would not be surprised to see Rashad Dubinion be the guy that runs away with this thing. There's also another guy I want to throw in there that I think will be in the mix too. He come from Tennessee. His name is Khalifa Keith. Now, you tell me, I mean, maybe the dude should have been a rapper. I don't know, with a name like Khalifa Keith. I mean, that sounds like a rapper name, but I think that guy, I mean, you get two pretty good, transfers from the SEC, one from Arkansas, one from Tennessee in your running back room, and you still bring guys that have been there like Jalen Calhoun back with Kanye Roberts. This is still maybe the deepest and most athletic part of this team, especially on offense, is its running back room.
I want to bring up one point on Dubinion. I just looked at Arkansas stats because I remember watching him a little bit last year playing for the Razorbacks. He finished fourth in team rushing. Obviously, Taylon Green at quarterback was in that mix. I think he was their second best rusher. But in terms of running backs, he finished third. He had 335 yards. So to Aikman's point, talking about his ability to be a hard runner, and he has that breakaway speed, I think he's going to be a really nice option for App State, and he might get the majority of the carries, being that he's coming from an SEC program. But this is going to be an offense that features two running backs really heavily. Kanye Roberts might be the second name listed on the depth chart, but he is still going to get his.
Sure. And I mean, that makes sense. If you've got depth at that position and you can take a lot of the exertion off of AJ Swann's plate, having played very, very sparingly at LSU last year, and frankly, even at Vanderbilt the year before. I mean, he only started 6 games, so it wasn't like he got a full season of reps, and that was 2 years ago at this point. So who knows? Aikman, as far as you talked about the receiving room kind of been hollowed out as opposed to what it's looked like, especially in years past when it felt like almost as deep as the running back rooms that you guys had been fielding. The only name that I see on the page and go, oh, I remember that, is Dalton Stroman. Everybody else is kind of like, who are these guys? So is there anybody else, or do you expect Stroman to kind of take over as that one, or do you think that it's going to be receiver by committee, or do you expect one of these transfers to kind of lead the pack?
Dalton Stroman is still going to be one of the guys in this offense. What I love, and this is probably my favorite thing that Dow Loggins has done in the transfer portal, is he hit the receiver room hard. I mean, we brought in, there's some guys from the SEC level, there's guys from the FCS level that were impact players at the FCS level that I think will contribute in this offense, but Dalton Stroman he's been there. He's going to be a consistent number 1 or number 2 option. But Davion Dozier from Arkansas is another guy I'm really curious to see how he's going to take to dropping down and playing at App. This is what I love. You look at Dalton Stroman, Davion Dozier, William Fowles. All these guys are 6'3" or taller. A couple of 6'4" and 6'5". Like, there is height and there is athleticism with these guys that are tall, lanky, can go up, catch the 50-50 balls. This is, to me, the biggest boom or bust portion possibly of the offense. Like, you see the potential all over the page with the athleticism and what they could do. Now, again, a lot of it's unproven. Dalton Stroman's really the only guy you look at and say, okay, he's been there. We know he can make an impact. We just got to see how he does it with A.J. Swan or J.J. Cole under center versus having a Joey Aguilar or someone else. So this receiver room is something I'm really excited about watching to see who really emerges as the true number 1. I think we could all point preseason and say, yeah, Dalton Stroman, Davion Dozier. I mean, it could end up being a guy that we're not even thinking about. I've heard that the coaching staff really loves a kid by the name of Jaden Barnes, who they brought up from Austin P, who had a really good year at the FCS level last year, that they really like the way he has taken to things throughout the spring and into summer workouts and everything else. So I'm excited. I mean, I think this receiving core could be something really fun to watch, but that's what this offense needs. This offense needs to have guys on the outside that can we know about the run game. We've talked about it, what it can do, but this offense, to really get back to where we need to be, we've got to have these guys on the outside step up and be impact players.
Do you think that that's what App had kind of been missing the last couple of years? Like, obviously, Clark had to say it was rocky as a tenure would be kind of an understatement. There would be a year where they were in the Sun Belt title game, and then the next year it's 500 below 500 ball. What offensively, what do you think was the biggest kind of do you think the receiving room was the biggest kind of Achilles heel of like trying to just get consistent production out of those guys?
It definitely was one of the major things I looked at. I mean, obviously, Caden Robinson at time was pretty much on an island, I felt like, where he was like the only guy waving his hands out here. But the problem is when the defensive backs and the safeties and the linebackers, when they all know that, okay, well, we can account for this guy, let's make one of these other guys step up and beat us. And then, at times, there was times, that the offensive line had been shaky as well. And I know we'll get in to the offensive line and everything else because it's kind of been rehauled a little bit as well with some transfers in and out of the program. But I definitely think there was a lack of playmaking ability on the outside. I think if you turn on the film and watch it, especially last year's games. Now, granted, we turned the ball over quite a bit, so it's hard to, when you turn the ball over at the rate we were turning the football over at times last year, it's hard to say anybody had a chance to be a playmaker on the outside. But it's one of those things where we've got to have this receiving room get back into form and get back into playing high-level football if we want to compete in the Sun Belt East Division especially.
Yeah. Zeke, I want to give you a chance to kind of break in here. Is there anything that you have questions about for Aikman, or, you can even transition to asking a question about the offensive line and because we're moving toward that direction anyway.
Right. Aikman, this does lead a little into the offensive line because it's a pretty overturned unit as a whole. When was the last time that you felt this level of uncertainty about the offense and the direction of the offense with this team? This uncertainty is something that I experienced very recently last season with Georgia State getting a new head coach. So I understand that adds a layer to it. But I mean, When was the last time even that you weren't 100% sold on who the starting quarterback was? Because, you had Chase Bryce and then, Ryan Berger for a day, and then you had Joey Aguilar. So when was the last time that you had this level of uncertainty, and how does it make you feel as a fan? And then also as someone, around the team?
It's definitely interesting because at first I didn't know how to feel, because it was the first time in quite a while that I'd sit back and looks like we're coming off just a dreadful season. Like, the fan base was livid. People knew there had to be a change. People knew a change was going to be coming because it was just that time. And then now it's one of those things where it's like the unknown, and it's like Brian said, you don't really have a choice at this point, but the unknown, I think, is kind of a good thing for us right now. I think we need it. We need it, and we needed it at the same time, if we can make that make any sense from Southern Dictionary. But the way I view this is one of those deals where, as uncomfortable as it may be not knowing which guy is going to make an impact, say, at receiver, or which guy is going to be the standout on the offensive line, I think that's a good thing, because it opens the playing field up for these, Power 5 recruits that Dow was able to bring in to jump into these spots and make an impact. And maybe his scheme ends up being a better fit for some of the guys that stayed through last year, that are back this year, that are going to get a chance to play. Because when I look at that offensive line, especially, you have Griffin Scroggs and Jaden Ramsey. That's it. That's the only two guys I look at and say, yeah, these guys are probably going to be starters that were contributors in the Shawn Clark era. Outside of that, your tackle spots, center, it's all going to be up for grabs out of these guys he's brought in from the transfer portal, or maybe even some guys that have decided to stay that were there a season ago are going to get a chance to see if they can step up in this new system. But it is something that I myself personally am glad that I feel this way, as crazy as it may sound, because we needed it. We needed to go outside the box. App always had this stigma attached to it where we got to stay in the family. We got to stay in the family when it comes to hiring coaches for football or whatever else from that Jerry Moore tree. Going outside the box worked well when you got Eli Drinkwitz. Now, granted, it was only 1 year, but it worked really well. I don't think we get Dow Loggins for just 1 year if he has a miraculous turnaround. I don't. I think maybe 2 or 3 to really prove himself as a head coach for the first time at the collegiate level. But I love the new vibe and the uncertainty feel, and I especially love reading all the preseason projections that's talking about maybe like 4th in the Sun Belt East Division, 8th or 9th overall in the conference. Like, it's new territory for App to be in since their move to the Sun Belt, but I also think it's a new way to really hit reset to the fullest degree and just kind of put new things and new goals into perspective and be like, okay, we're still Appalachian State. We're not used to losing seasons. This isn't what we do. This isn't what we have made a living off of, especially, in the last 25 years since the turn of the century. It was needed, and it's a good thing.
Aikman, I wanted to ask you about something. I remember you bringing this up as a point. I can't remember whether you and I talked about it privately or whether we talked about it on the episode you were on. App State doesn't have an official offensive coordinator in title, right?
No. To my knowledge, Dow Loggins will call the plays. Like, he's basically your offensive coordinator and head coach in one.
That's still pretty unique to me. I feel like even if you have a guy where you're like, I know the head coach is calling the plays, you at least have a guy there in title. Now, what that guy does, I assume he helps with scheming or like tape, review, like trying to find mismatches, things like that. But I feel like this is going to be either this is kind of the way that things should move, or it's going to be like next year you guys have an offensive coordinator December 1st, and it's going to be like we at least need somebody there entitled to help out with game planning and stuff like that. So that's pretty unique.
Well, and that that's something that I found to be interesting because it was probably I was 2, maybe 3 weeks ago when I was going through some of my notes for stuff, and I was like, they've never hired anybody to be offensive coordinator. And I was like, maybe I'm dreaming. And I went back through and looked through my notes and, went through the entire offensive staff page twice just to make sure I read everybody's title right, that maybe it wasn't buried, as like the second or third thing on, a position coach, a receiver coach, or a tight end coach, or whatever else. But no, but from what I've been able to understand and find out, is that Dow Loggins is basically head coach and offensive coordinator for year 1.
Okay. Well, we'll see how that all works out on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, let's kind of transition to defense here. Historically, App State having a really good defense has kind of been the bread and butter, along with running the football and not making mistakes, not turning the ball over. Last year, you kind of saw some of the cracks start to form. There were a lot of games. I feel like one game they would put together a pretty good performance, and the next game it was totally the opposite. I think you guys had a game against South Alabama that rings in my memory.
Let's don't talk about that South Alabama game. I'm sorry to cut you off, but oh dear God, no. Let's don't. That's like the furthest game from my memory because I was working that game back at the studio where I work at, where we're the flagship for the football and basketball broadcast. And that was a long Thursday night, man. That was a long Thursday night.
Well, it was just, it was more just saying last year defensively, it felt like you were all over the place. And I don't know if you felt this way or not, but the thing that felt different to me, the most different, obviously having Scott Sloan be the defensive coordinator at the time, I kind of went on a little bit of a rant when you were on the episode last time after Shawn Clark's firing, and was like, here's all the problems we had under Scott Sloan at Southern. Did any of this sound familiar? And you were like, oh yeah, that sounds exactly right. So clearly some of that still had some trickle down. I felt like the thing for App that really hindered them last year was the lack of one really, really solid pass rusher that I feel like had been kind of the backbone of defenses at App in the past. Did you feel kind of a similar way about that?
Absolutely. And not to mention the fact that it felt like the secondary was just kind of, playing with an open blanket in the middle of the field that said, here's a guy, 20 yards in the middle of the defense. Go ahead and we'll just make sure we'll try to make sure he doesn't gain 40 yards, but we'll give him 30 yards, basically, is how it felt watching the defense at time a year ago, because for so many years since they made the transition to the Sun Belt, it was like, okay, can the offense just not turn the ball over, get the running game going, and then the defense do its job that it could consistently do? That wasn't the case last year. Last year it was, my God, we've got to go play defense, and I know that chances are we're not going to stop anybody. And that's pretty much how it felt all year. I mean, the South Alabama game was one of the many games you could look at a season ago, and just be like, what are we even doing? There was no communication at times, it seemed, anything. I mean, I know we talked about this, the problems with Scott Sloan that you also have felt the pain of as well, but the lack of communication, so many things that just irked me to my core watching this team play defense a season ago. But when you go get a guy like DJ Smith from Missouri to be the offensive coordinator, the former Mountaineer, this is the guy they brought back home, so to speak. So at least, Dow Loggins had the ability to say, you know what, we're going to stick to a little bit of App State tradition here. We're going to bring a guy the fan base has been wanting to see come back for quite a while. It helps that Dow has the relationship with Eli Drinkowitz and DJ Smith both now share that App State connection. So I felt like this was probably like there wasn't much of a sell job here to be had to DJ to be able to be the defensive coordinator. And I think you're going to see much better communication this year out of the defense. I mean, quite frankly, I don't know that communication can be much worse than what we saw a season ago, but they brought in some good transfers on the defensive side of the football, especially at linebacker and defensive back. Now, we lost some pieces up front. You lose a guy like Santana Hopper.
You lose a guy like Nate Johnson. You lost some key guys on that defensive front. But again, I don't know that it is. While their loss will be felt, I do feel like there's going to be guys that come in because, again, we don't really know, is it going to be straight up Missouri-style defense that DJ tries to run? Is it going to be a combination of something new? What is the defense going to look like formation-wise? I think the same questions we had for the offense when the staff is completely new like it is and so many new players that have different skill sets. This is where it gets intriguing because it almost feels like you are playing a true guessing game.
Aikman, I want you to expound a little bit on, and by the way, expound is my educated ass word of the day. But I want you to go a little deeper, on this defense. You talked about the new defensive coordinator being familiar with App and what, he's going to bring to Dowell Loggins' staff. But sometimes when you get a new head coach and a new coaching staff, you don't particularly like when you have half of your defense from the year before coming back. You do have 5 starters returning from a year ago. Where do you stand on that? Are you happy about that experience coming back, or do you wish it was just a whole new lot of faces that were leading this defense?
That's where the defensive side of the football is one of those where I was like, okay, I really felt like the new blood was needed simply because we were so dreadful at times a season ago. But there is some guys, that we as a fan base, I'm speaking for the fan base here, but also I think that we'll still be an impact player. I think Jordan Favors coming back is going to be a help to have a piece in the defensive secondary that can do some good things. But I'm a big fan of who they were able to bring in. DJ Smith obviously has the connection here at linebacker, but he was able to bring in a guy that I'm curious to see if he doesn't step in and play, maybe not right away, but I think his name's going to be one that's really talked about as we get in to fall camp, and that's Brayshawn Littlejohn. I believe I'm saying his name right. Is the young man from Missouri. He's a linebacker from Missouri, and I think he's going to step in, and I think he's going to play a key part of this defense. I think at the linebacker position, you also get Jaden Bethea, a redshirt sophomore who does come back that I think is going to see some playing time this year. Kyle Arnholt is a redshirt senior. He's one of your more experienced guys overall that you've got coming back. He was one of the better tacklers for if you wanted to track that stat for our defense a season ago. He was one of the better linebackers and overall defensive players I felt that we had. So there is some old blood that is still in the mix. But I think with DJ Smith and the new staff, once they get, some things ironed out, and it may take 2 or 3 weeks, the Charlotte game, you may see breakdown in coverages. You're probably going to see some things possibly get miscommunicated in week 1. That's to be expected. You get that Lindenwood game to get it sorted out, to kind of get your feet under you before a very, very, and I can't emphasize this enough, important Southern Miss game in week 3, because not only because that's the first Sun Belt game, but because people's going to view Southern Miss a lot differently this year too, with what they've got in the coaching ranks this year with Huff going from Marshall to Southern Miss. That Southern Miss game is going to be so key. So they've got a couple weeks where they can get it straightened out, but I think it's going to be a matter of once they get it straightened out, there's guys at that linebacker position and in the backfield that are going to be kind of the guys you look at. Okay, we've got some hybrid edge rushers that we've brought in from the transfer portal as well. That's going to be guys to watch. I honestly think you will get a defensive front of rotation at the beginning until guys really start to make a name for themselves. So I think the first 2 weeks you're going to cycle guys in, if not by series, every other series. I think it's going to be a pure rotation to start to see who really takes the brass ring, so to speak.
Zeke, did you have anything else on the defense before we kind of flip the page over to the schedule and look at potential wins and losses for the upcoming season?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, because Matt had asked this question. I just want to make sure that I understood you right, Aikman. You said that you were pretty pleased that App went, as you said, out of the family for Dowell. But the consensus is pretty pleased with the hiring of with going in-house for the DC.
Yes, absolutely. Most people love the fact that DJ Smith was back because he played for Jerry Moore, was a part of the first run of national championships in the mid 2000s. It helped getting the program put on the map, and so it's a guy that they opened their arms wide open to seeing him come back to the sidelines, and boom.
All right, so let's go ahead and transition over to the schedule for the upcoming season. Some of the games Aikman has already mentioned. Charlotte to open the season on a Friday night at Charlotte. Lindenwood as a tune-up game. Southern Miss, who Aikman mentioned. Aikman, not only do you have to contend at Southern Miss with Charles Huff, but now Blake Anderson, former Arkansas State head coach, coming back to be their OC. That if you're still having breakdowns in coverage by week 3, he's probably going to really make it hurt for that. And then you get a bye. Two out of conference games, Boise State and Oregon State. You get to play Oregon State at home, which is nice. Usually that wouldn't happen, but the Pac-12 is still in shambles at this point as it sits today. So, take them where you can get them. I think my biggest question is, and if we want to get into specific games that we're looking at, my question is, as of today, the DraftKings Sportsbook has App State's over-under for the season win totals at 5.5. Personally, I feel like that's probably a good barometer for it because I think there's just so much uncertainty at almost every position and with the coaching situations that if you're going to set it basically at 6 and be like, here it is, either they make a bowl game or they don't, what do you want to bet on? I think that's a pretty good barometer. But yeah, I mean, I was looking at some of the games. It's like, I think Southern Miss is going to be a tough one. I think you guys were really blessed not to have to play Ashton Janty and Boise last year and getting them this year instead. That I think they still have some good talent, but he went number 5 in the draft. Like let's put the cards on the table here. But in conference, it's like Southern Miss, maybe Old Dominion. You get Georgia Southern. That game gets moved up from the end of the season to November 6th. I don't know. I don't exactly know how I feel about that. Don't love it. I loved it. I liked it better when it was rivalry week, and now it's like Georgia Southern's probably going to play like Marshall to close the season, and I'm going to be like, who cares?
We're playing Arkansas State, so we feel completely on that.
Right. And then, yeah, so I mean, really, to me, on paper, the tough conference games for you guys are Southern Miss, maybe Old Dominion. They have to have some pieces around Colton Joseph because, frankly, he was running like a one-man show last year in Norfolk. Georgia Southern, rivalry game, always tough. Even you get it at home, but it's still always a uncertainty. At James Madison, and then that's kind of it. Like a lot of the other conference games you guys have are teams that are either trying to retool it like a Marshall let's be honest, I think Tim Beck's days are numbered at Coastal. So I think you guys will probably win that game, or you'll be playing against a team without a head coach at that point in the season. Like we don't know.
Can I just say real quick that James Madison scares the bejesus out of me. So the fact that you guys have to go to Harrisonburg, my thoughts and prayers are with the App State community that week.
That's what people said 2 years ago, too, when we went to Harrisonburg the last time, and we walked out of there with a last-second win. This team, now granted, it's a new coach and a new staff, but we have traditionally gotten up to play James Madison. There's old blood there from the FCS days in the playoffs. Those two teams have had some phenomenal games over the years, whether it be at the FCS or the FBS level. I love playing James Madison, because I think, like Georgia Southern, it just brings the best out of the two programs because they want to beat each other. I think getting those two games back-to-back on the schedule in November, I mean, you couldn't ask for it to possibly roll out for App to be the true make or break stretch of the season. It's like if you get through Georgia Southern and James Madison, let's say you split it, or if you have the miraculous thing that you go 2-0 in that stretch to finish out with Marshall and Arkansas State, you have the ability to really finish on a strong note. But that two out of the last four stretch of Georgia Southern and James Madison, man, that could be the make or break point on the over under for the season on the win total. Me personally, I don't care to say it, I took the over, not just because I'm a fan, because I think 6 to 7 wins is a really good starting point for this team in year one for Dow Loggins. But I don't know that I've ever looked at it with a team to say I could see this team possibly if transfers click, guys stay healthy, all that stuff we talk about preseason. Could they win 8 games? But at the same time, could they also only win 4 games if the transfers don't click? I think it's a very high and low range that you could see for this team. That's why I think you see a lot of preseason predictions for this team all over the map.
I think tentatively I would take the under, but I think I would have you guys at like five wins or so. Just frankly, I think with the amount of uncertainty, I think you guys don't leave yourselves a ton of room for error. I think is sort of where I sit with it, where it's like, yeah, the conference slate is pretty easy, but Charlotte, I have no idea what to expect from Charlotte. I don't follow them as a program. I don't have any inkling of how they're going to be this year. Lindenwood is a win. I think you guys probably dropped the game to Southern Miss in Hattiesburg in game 3. I don't think you beat Boise. Oregon State, I kind of like what their head coach there is building, but like, again, I don't know what the ghost of the Pac-12 looks like at this point. I think
Plus,
you guys
they have to come to Boone, which does play in our favor.
Yeah. I think you beat both Georgia State and Coastal. I think both of those teams are even further in the rebuild mode than App is. But to me, we talked about the other games, but to me, like you said, you're going to have to probably beat Marshall and Arkansas State to end the season, I think, to make sure that you are breaking through that win total. Because I think you could even lose. I think you wouldn't want to, but I think you could even lose the stretch of Old Dominion, Southern, and Madison if things go right early in the season, but you have to beat Marshall and Arkansas State to end it if you're going to hit that number. So that's just sort of where I sit with it. Tentatively, like I said, I would sit about 5 wins, but that's just because if you trip up in any of these games or a quarterback gets hurt or Swan isn't what you wanted him to be or any of those number of different things, Loggins has his plate full from both being the OC and the head coach. Like you find out all these things or one of these things doesn't work, then you're just kind of left without many options. So I'm going to tentatively go under, but it's like by a game or so. It's not like I'm saying, oh, you guys are going to win 2 games this year. So
I genuinely believe the Charlotte game will set the tone for non-conference, not just because it's week 1, but because if we come out and we play really well in the Charlotte game and we win by, 2 or 3 scores or whatever, you roll through that Lindenwood game in week 2, in which you should have absolutely no problem with. If you do, you have bigger issues. Then the Southern Miss game with Boise and Oregon State, that 3-week stretch, the thing I do love, though, that maybe some people don't look at, you play that game at Southern Miss in Hattiesburg, you get a bye week before you have to go back out and play Boise. So if things don't go right in the Southern Miss game, you've got a whole extra week to iron some things out, to watch what Boise's doing. They've got some pretty, if I'm not mistaken, from what I've looked over their schedule, they've got some pretty good games in their non-conference schedule with App kind of sandwiched right in between. And so, I'm like you. I'm glad we're playing Boise this year instead of last year because I do think they are going to be more vulnerable this season. And then that Oregon State game, man, flip a coin because, obviously you don't know what Oregon State's going to ultimately look like in early October. You don't know how their September is going to go, the ghost of the Pac-12. But I'll make a bold prediction. This is a bold prediction. This is just what I think. I think after Oregon State, there is a decent chance after Oregon State that we are walking through, that would be the first 5 games. There is a solid chance that we're 4-1 going into that Georgia State game if things fall right.
I think that stretch of Georgia Southern, James Madison, that is the most interesting stretch maybe in the East all year, because those are the 3 teams as we look preseason that are going to be in anywhere close to contention for that East spot in the championship game. And again, if App comes out of those both with wins, you look at them and be like, shoot, man, yeah, you're probably walking into the conference championship game with those 2 wins. So I'm really excited for that early November slate, because especially with that, I mean, Georgia Southern game, that game on a Thursday will hopefully get some extra eyes than it normally would. However, it's got to obviously contend with Thursday night football. Those 2 games, I think, from App's perspective, could ultimately decide where they end the season in the East standings.
Oh, absolutely. That November is going to be must-watch TV if you're an App State football fan, simply because, with Georgia Southern and James Madison, your first 2 games, it doesn't get any bigger, because it very easily could dictate the Sun Belt East right there, especially if you take care of Georgia State, Coastal Carolina, and Old Dominion leading up to that. If you do what you need to do, even if you lose the Southern Miss game, if you do what you need to do against those interdivisional opponents in Georgia State, Coastal Carolina, and Old Dominion, that sets it up for that 2-week stretch with Georgia Southern and James Madison could be your spot in the Sun Belt Championship game. And it's going to be a super tall task to get it done. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm for anything crazy sometimes. I mean, that's why we call it the Fun Belt, because crazy things can happen no matter from the East Division or the West Division. Would it really shock anybody if a team that was at the bottom of the division a season ago, basically, and in the back end of the conference overall, rose up to have a chance for a bid at a conference championship game 1 year later? I mean, it's kind of the tagline to the Sun Belt is fun things happen here.
Yeah. Yeah, and didn't we kind of see Marshall just do that a little bit like a year ago, where the year before they were DOA and had no quarterback, and then all of a sudden, oh, guess what? We've got this guy who's just been a diamond in the rough, hanging out on the bench, waiting to go in. So
you mean Cole Pennington was better for a short while than that guy?
No. Stone Earl, neither. Nope, none of them. All right. So as we sort of wrap up here, Zeke, Matt, any sort of last second thoughts before we kind of plug our socials and get out of here? But I feel like this has been a good comprehensive look at App State in the year ahead.
I say this all the time when I talk about App, and I think it really stems from the multiple years in a row of rivalry that App and the Cajuns had in the Sun Belt Championship game. Played each other, the first, was it 4 straight? And so, I think that there's a lot of mutual respect between both programs. I always find myself cheering for App when they're not playing UL. So, I'm hoping for better years ahead for the Mountaineers. And Aikman, as always, enjoy having you on, man. Your insight into App is great, and you're welcome here anytime.
I appreciate it, Matt. Thank you. And I will say, whenever you talk to other fans and other people that support the App State program, I've never heard anybody say anything bad about the Cajuns. Like, that's just, you look across the division, and if the Sun Belt could have those cross-divisional games that were automatic every year, like this East Division team plays this West Division team every year, no matter
Right.
what, to me, App And the Cajuns, man, that's one that I would be on board for keeping, going from the East Division to the West Division, because like we talked about with, App and Georgia Southern and App and James Madison, that's two teams in this conference that every time they play each other, they're going to bring out the best in each other to get the win.
Absolutely. All right. So last minute thoughts, Zeke, you got anything? And if not, go ahead and just plug your socials, and then we'll throw it to Aikman and then Matt, and then I'll finish up here and we'll sign out.
No, man. Aikman, thanks for being here as always. You guys can find me on Twitter at Zeke Palermo, ZekePalermo. That's it.
Aikman, go ahead.
Well, guys, thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it. All three of you guys do a wonderful job. I listen just about every week when you guys put something out, just because I've got my head in the App State bag all the time. I'm always watching the conference, keeping up with what's going on, because I love what the Sun Belt is doing. I love the future talk of, now that we're losing Texas State, who are we going to bring into the fold now to, make this conference, even more regionalized in a day and age where teams don't care to travel, 2,000 miles across the country to play conference games. Damn it, the Sun Belt is going to keep it in the true portion of the United States where it needs to be throughout the South, and I absolutely love it. It's why we fell in love with college sports, was those regional games, those rivalries that we had to hang our hats on. And I love that the Sun Belt is just embracing their footprint in this part of the country, from North Carolina to Louisiana and Arkansas, to say this is who we are and we're keeping our teams together. So thank you guys again. You can follow me on Twitter at Radio Guy AC anytime. I appreciate it. Look forward to hopefully coming back on during the season with you guys.
Absolutely. Matt?
You can find me on social media at MiguezMatt. Sayonara to the Bobcats. You will not be missed. I'm just gonna be very blunt. You won't be missed. Good luck in the Pac-8. But anyways, again, you can find me on social at MiguezMatt. Back writing for Underdog Dynasty, covering the Sun Belt. So you can check that out, of course, at UnderdogDynasty.com.
As always, you can follow the show on Twitter at WarmWeatherFans. You can send us an email, warmweatherfans@gmail.com. We obviously have all of our social platforms. We're at WarmWeatherFans, whether it be YouTube, TikTok, again, Twitter, what have you. And you can follow me personally on Twitter at WatchTheStone. We will be back later this week with an episode on the Troy Trojans. This has been an episode of Warm Weather Fans.